Okay, so this is the second episode of the Fundamentally Explained Law podcast. And before we begin on today's topic of the European Court of Human Rights, there are just a few small introductory points. I am, as the host of this podcast, not a lawyer. As such, this is not legal advice and shouldn't be seen as such. I do have, however, a law degree and, more importantly, an interest in law. So come and explore this with me as we move into the topic of the European Court of Human Rights. Okay, so last week on the Fundamentally Explained podcast, we looked at the Human Rights Act and the way that can be upheld in UK law. Today we're looking at a very different area, how the convention rights can be upheld outside of UK law by the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights. So, by its very name, you probably worked out that the European Court of Human Rights is a court. Well, it's kind of a court. It has judges and it has everything you think of from a court, but it doesn't have quite the same kind of sentencing powers that a court that you'd be familiar with generally has. So let's look at it. The judges are elected by Parliament, not the UK Parliament, but a parliamentary assembly of the European Council, and candidates are nominated by the member states. And a simple matter can be dealt with by a single judge. An established case, a case that deals with established facts and established law, could take 3 judges. And a more complex case will be heard by 7 judges. The most complex of cases are dealt with by 17 judges in a grand chamber, but most cases never reach that point. Most cases just aren't that complex enough to need that many judges to sit on them, but it is possible for that many to sit on an issue like that in a grand chamber. So admissibility will be considered by a single judge. So that's the admissibility of a particular case, any case entering the European Court of Human Rights, and it's considered by a single judge. And if that single judge is unable to decide, then the matter is referred to a committee. That committee will be made up of 3 judges, and they will be able to decide on the admissibility that a single judge was just simply unable to decide on. The committee will look at the issue and they will either reject the matter entirely, but if they don't reject it, they accept it. For a matter to be accepted, all domestic routes, that's all routes that could be taken within the country the matter occurred in, must have been exhausted before they can take the matter to the European Court of Human Rights. An important power that the European Court of Human Rights has is that at any point during the proceedings, the court can decide that the matter's inadmissible, and that's at any stage. So even if it is seen as admissible at the start of the proceedings, it can at some point during the proceedings, possibly quite far down the line, be ruled as inadmissible. So, if the matter is ruled as admissible, the European Court of Human Rights will investigate the matter. They will hear representations from both parties and they'll try and get a friendly settlement. But if that settlement just isn't happening, they may issue a judgment, and that'll come from a chamber of 7 judges. If a party isn't happy with the judgment issued by a chamber, then that party can request within 3 months of that decision for it to be referred to a grand chamber. Any party can request that the matter be referred to a grand chamber, but if that request is outside of the 3-month time limit, then the judgment of the chamber is the final judgment. If both parties agree and declare that they have no intention of requesting that the matter be referred to a grand chamber, then the final decision of the chamber might be considered to be the final decision before that 3-month period is out. Requests for the matter to be referred to the Grand Chamber are heard by 5 judges. If that request is refused, then the Chamber's decision is the final decision. These decisions aren't unanimous, or at least they don't have to be. They can be a majority decision of the 5 judges. Unfortunately, as I mentioned at the start of this, there's no real method for an enforcement of any judgment from the European Court of Human Rights. It's really a major issue with how they operate, because their only real measure that they can take in any sense to enforce a judgment is international pressure, which is a really nebulous kind of thing, but is basically each government of the countries that signed the convention putting pressure on each other diplomatically to enforce the judgment of their own accord. But really, that's a very empty kind of a concept and a very empty kind of way of enforcing a judgment. The ultimate threat, if you could call it that, is the country being expelled from the Council of Europe. But again, it's not that serious a threat, and it's not necessarily something that's going to truly enforce a judgment. Thanks for listening, and if you are listening on YouTube, subscribe and like this video. For more from this channel, make sure to click that notification bell. And if you're listening on Spotify, please follow this podcast, and again, click that notification bell. Whichever way you've been listening, all comments are greatly appreciated, so if you have one, please leave it in the designated comments area.